The old man had been coming to this depot for years. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon he would stand by the fence, watching the young soldiers work on the vehicles. Some of the newer personnel thought he was odd, maybe lonely, perhaps a military enthusiast with too much time on his hands. They never asked his name. They never wondered why he always studied the vehicles with such intensity, why his eyes tracked every movement of the mechanics with professional precision. His red jacket had become a familiar sight, but familiarity had bred indifference. To them, he was just part of the landscape, as permanent and unremarkable as the fence posts themselves. The Mowag situation was deteriorating rapidly. The vehicle had been moved to an unpaved area for undercarriage inspection when the ground, saturated from 3 days of rain, had given way beneath its massive weight. The rear axle had sunk nearly 2 feet into thick sucking mud. The front wheels barely touched solid ground. Every attempt to drive it out had only dug it deeper, the powerful engine roaring uselessly as the tires spun and threw mud in every direction. The 3 mechanics, all in their late 20s and early 30s, stood in a semicircle around the trapped vehicle, their uniforms splattered with mud, their faces showing frustration and exhaustion. The youngest mechanic, barely 25, pulled out his phone and started calculating. He spoke loudly enough for his colleagues to hear, as if volume would somehow solve the problem. "We need the heavy recovery crane from the main base. That's a 4-hour drive minimum. Then we need to coordinate with command, get authorization, file the incident report. We're looking at tomorrow afternoon, at the earliest, before we can even attempt extraction." His voice carried that particular tone of someone who had already given up, who was now just managing the bureaucratic aftermath of failure. The senior mechanic, a sergeant with 15 years of service, nodded grimly. He had seen stuck vehicles before, but never a Mowag buried this deep. The mud had created a suction effect around the chassis. Even with the crane, we might damage the undercarriage trying to lift it. This is going to be expensive. This is going to be a nightmare of paperwork. Command is going to want answers. His words hung in the air like a death sentence. The third mechanic just stared at the vehicle, arms crossed, saying nothing, but clearly thinking about whose career this incident might damage. That was when the old man, by the fence, cleared his throat. "Excuse me." His voice was quiet, barely audible over the idle rumble of nearby generators. The 3 mechanics didn't even turn around. The old man spoke again, slightly louder but still gentle, still respectful. "Excuse me, gentlemen. I think I might be able to help." This time they heard him. The youngest mechanic turned, saw the old man in his red jacket, and actually laughed. A short, dismissive bark of laughter that carried no humour, only condescension. "Sir, with all due respect, this isn't a spectator sport. We have a serious situation here. Please step back from the fence." The old man didn't move. His sad, serious eyes remained fixed on the trapped Mowag. "You're approaching it wrong. The angle of extraction matters more than the pulling force. The vehicle's weight distribution is your ally, not your enemy. You don't need a crane. You need physics and patience." The sergeant turned now, his expression hardening. "Listen, old-timer, I appreciate your interest, but we're trained professionals. This isn't something you fix with folk wisdom. This is a 30-ton military vehicle in a critical situation. We need proper equipment and proper procedures." But the old man persisted, his voice still calm, still measured. "The front differential lock is engaged, isn't it? That's why the front wheels won't grip. And you've got the tire pressure too high for soft ground conditions. Drop it to 15 psi, disengage the front lock, use a kinetic extraction with the support truck positioned at a 45-degree angle, not straight on. You'll need to create a rocking motion, not a steady pull." The specificity of his words made the youngest mechanic pause. How would some random old man know about differential locks and extraction angles? The sergeant's face flushed red. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to step back. You don't know what you're talking about. We've already tried different approaches. This vehicle isn't going anywhere without heavy equipment. Now please, let us do our jobs." There was an edge to his voice now. Irritation mixing with embarrassment that this conversation was even happening. The old man looked at the sergeant for a long moment, his expression unchanged, that perpetual sadness in his eyes somehow deepening. Then he simply said 3 words that would alter everything. "Call Colonel Morrison." The silence that followed those 3 words was absolute. Even the generator noise seemed to fade. The sergeant's face went from red to pale in an instant. The youngest mechanic's smirk vanished completely. The third mechanic, who had been silent until now, actually took a step backward. The sergeant's voice, when he finally found it, was barely a whisper. "What did you just say?" The old man repeated himself, same quiet tone, same sad expression. "Call Colonel Morrison. Tell him Jack Reeves needs 3 minutes with the Mowag. Tell him exactly that. Jack Reeves. 3 minutes." The sergeant pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He walked several paces away, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand running through his hair in what looked like a gesture of panic. The conversation lasted less than a minute. When he returned, his entire demeanor had changed. His shoulders were rigid, his face drained of color. He stood before the old man and did something none of them had ever seen him do with a civilian. He stood at attention. "Sir, Colonel Morrison is on his way," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. He said, "to give you whatever access you need." He said, "to follow your instructions exactly. He'll be here in 10 minutes. But sir," he said you should start now." The old man, Jack Reeves, walked through the gate that the youngest mechanic hurriedly opened. Up close, they could see details they had missed from a distance. The red jacket was worn but clean, carefully maintained. Beneath it, his plain t-shirt was tucked neatly into his pants. But it was his hands they noticed most. Scarred, calloused hands that had clearly spent decades working with machinery. And hands that moved with absolute certainty as he approached the trapped Mowag. He walked around the vehicle once, studying it from every angle, occasionally crouching to examine the mud, the tire depth, the chassis position. His assessment took less than 30 seconds. Then he started giving orders. His voice remained quiet, but now it carried an unmistakable authority that made the 3 trained mechanics jump to obey without question. "You," he pointed to the youngest, get in the driver's seat. "Don't touch anything until I tell you." "You," he indicated the sergeant. "Bring that support truck over here. Position it exactly where I point. And you," he looked at the third mechanic, "I need you to deflate all 6 tires on the Mowag to 15 psi. Use the gauge, be precise." The 3 men scattered to their tasks like cadets on their first day of basic training. Jack Reeves positioned himself where he could see both vehicles, the trapped Mowag and the support truck. His instructions came in a steady stream, each one specific, each one delivered with quiet confidence. "Driver, disengage your front differential lock. Good. Now, very gently, rock the steering wheel left and right. Don't turn, just rock it. You're breaking the suction seal around the front wheels." The young mechanic inside the Mowag followed the instructions exactly. His earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Through the windshield, they could see his face tight with concentration, following every word from the old man in the red jacket. "Support truck, forward 3 feet. Stop. Now, angle left, about 40 degrees. Perfect. Attach your tow strap to the rear recovery point, not the front. We're going to pull from the strongest part of the frame." The sergeant worked quickly, his movements efficient despite his obvious nervousness. As he attached the heavy tow strap, Jack Reeves walked over and inspected the connection, adjusting it slightly, ensuring the angle was exactly right. The sergeant watched him work, and something like recognition was beginning to dawn in his eyes. Those hands knew this equipment better than anyone he had ever seen. The tire pressure adjustments completed, Jack Reeves checked each tire personally. running his hand along the treads, feeling the give in the rubber. He nodded, satisfied. Now comes the important part. Driver, when I give the word, you're going to apply power very gradually, not a sudden burst, smooth and steady. At the same time, support truck, you'll pull, but in pulses. 3 seconds of tension, 1 second release. 3 seconds tension, 1 second release. We're creating a rocking motion. The mud will break its grip if we work with the physics instead of against them. Both drivers acknowledged, their voices tight with tension. Jack Reeves raised his hand. He looked at the Mowag, at the mud, at the positioning of both vehicles. His expression never changed, that same sad seriousness. But there was something else now. A focus, an intensity that made it impossible to look away from him. He dropped his hand. Now begin. The support truck's engine growled as it applied tension to the tow strap. The Mowag's engine responded with a lower rumble, power flowing smoothly to the wheels. 3 seconds of pull. 1 second release. 3 seconds release. The massive vehicle rocked almost imperceptibly. Again, Jack Reeves's voice cut through the engine noise. The rhythm continued. 3 seconds. Release. 3 seconds. Release. The Mowag rocked more noticeably now. Mud began to break away from the chassis in thick clumps. Driver, when you feel the front end lift, steer gently right. Don't overcorrect. The young mechanic inside gave a thumbs up through the windshield. The rocking continued. 5 cycles, 10 cycles, 15. Then, on the 18th cycle, something shifted. The front end of the Mowag lifted several inches. The suction seal broke with an audible sucking sound. Maintain rhythm. Don't change anything. Jack Reeves's voice remained absolutely calm. The support truck continued its pulsing pull. The Mowag continued its steady power application. With each cycle now, the vehicle moved forward incrementally. 6 inches, a foot, 2 feet. The rear axle began to climb out of its muddy prison. 3 feet, 4 feet. The massive armoured personnel carrier was moving, slowly but inexorably, climbing out of what 3 trained mechanics had declared impossible. At the 2-minute mark, rear wheels found purchase on slightly firmer ground. Now, driver, steady acceleration. Support truck, maintain constant pull. We're past the critical point. The Mowag's engine note changed as the wheels gripped solid earth. The vehicle surged forward, mud flying from its tires, the chassis clearing the depression completely. 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. The Mowag rolled onto completely solid ground and stopped. The entire extraction from Jack Reeves's first instruction to the vehicle's complete freedom had taken 2 minutes and 47 seconds. The 3 mechanics stood in stunned silence, staring at the freed vehicle as if it had performed a miracle. That was the moment Colonel Morrison arrived. His staff car pulled up to the depot, and he emerged in his dress uniform, moving quickly toward the scene. He was a tall man in his early 50s, his bearing unmistakably military, his face set in serious lines. But when he saw Jack Reeves standing beside the freed Mowag, his expression transformed. The seriousness gave way to something deeper, something that looked almost like pain mixed with profound respect. He walked directly to the old man, and without hesitation, without regard for his dress uniform or the muddy ground, Colonel Morrison came to attention and saluted. The 3 mechanics watched in complete shock as their commanding officer held that salute, rigid and perfect, for a full 5 seconds before Jack Reeves almost reluctantly returned it with a small nod. Morrison's voice when he spoke was thick with emotion. "Master Sergeant Reeves, sir. It's been too long." Jack Reeves's sad expression softened just slightly. "Just Jack now. Tom. Been a long time since anyone called me Master Sergeant." But the Colonel shook his head firmly. "Once a Master Sergeant, always a Master Sergeant. Especially when you're the man who wrote half the vehicle recovery protocols we still use today. The youngest mechanic felt his stomach drop. The sergeant's face had gone white as paper. The third mechanic looked like he might be sick. Colonel Morrison turned to address them, and his voice carried the weight of command and barely controlled anger. "Do you three have any idea who this man is? This is Master Sergeant Jack Reeves, retired, 32 years of service. He ran the Army's Vehicle Recovery and Maintenance Training Program for 15 years. He personally trained over 2,000 mechanics and recovery specialists. He's extracted vehicles from situations that would make your stuck Mowag look like a minor inconvenience. He's pulled tanks out of rivers, recovered helicopters from mountainsides, and salvaged equipment in combat zones under enemy fire." Morrison continued, his voice rising. "This man has forgotten more about military vehicles than the three of you will ever know. And you dismissed him. You laughed at him. You told him to step back and let the professionals work." The youngest mechanic looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. The sergeant couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Morrison turned back to Jack Reeves. "Sir, I apologize on behalf of these men and this entire depot. Your expertise and your service deserve nothing but the highest respect." Jack Reeves shook his head slowly. "They didn't know, Tom. How could they? I'm just an old man in a red jacket now." But Colonel Morrison wasn't finished. He addressed the three mechanics again. Master Sergeant Reeves didn't just train mechanics. He pioneered kinetic extraction techniques that are now standard across all branches of the military. The procedure you just witnessed, that's the Reeves method. It's in the manual he wrote. Every time you reference vehicle recovery protocols, you're using his work. And he's been coming to this depot twice a week for 3 years, watching you work, and not one of you ever asked his name, or wondered why he watched with such attention. Not one of you showed him basic courtesy. The shame on the three mechanics' faces was absolute. The sergeant finally found his voice. "Sir, Master Sergeant Reeves, I have no excuse. I was arrogant and dismissive. You offered help, and I rejected it, out of pride. I'm deeply sorry." The youngest mechanic stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Sir, I laughed at you. I treated you like you were nobody. I was completely wrong and completely disrespectful. I'm ashamed." The third mechanic simply said, "I'm sorry, sir. Truly sorry." Jack Reeves looked at each of them in turn, his sad, serious expression unchanged. "You made assumptions based on what you saw. An old man in worn clothes. You forgot that experience doesn't always come in a crisp uniform." Colonel Morrison placed a hand on Jack Reeves' shoulder. "Sir, I know you retired to have peace and quiet. I know you come here just to stay connected to the work you loved. But would you consider, maybe once a month, coming inside the fence? Officially, we have young mechanics who could learn so much from you, not from a manual, but from watching you work, hearing you explain the why behind the procedures. You could save us from incidents like this. You could save careers, equipment, maybe even lives." Jack Reeves was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the freed Mowag, now sitting safely on solid ground. Finally he spoke. "I come here because I miss it. The work, the problem-solving, the satisfaction of freeing a stuck vehicle or diagnosing a complex mechanical issue. I watch because it keeps me connected to who I was, to the best years of my life. If I can help, if these young people want to learn, then yes, once a month. But I'm not looking for ceremony or special treatment. I just want to work with the machines again." Colonel Morrison smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his military bearing. "Then it's settled. First Tuesday of every month, you're officially our consultant, with full depot access and whatever resources you need." The three mechanics approached Jack Reeves together. The sergeant spoke for all of them. "Master Sergeant Reeves, sir, we would be honored to learn from you. We were wrong in every possible way today. If you're willing to teach us, we're willing to learn, and we'll make sure every person at this depot knows who you are and what you've done for this service." Jack Reeves nodded slowly. Then let's start with Lesson 1. Never assume you know everything. The moment you think you've seen it all, that's when you stop learning. And in this work, when you stop learning, people can get hurt. Equipment can be lost. Always stay humble. Always stay curious. Always respect experience wherever you find it. Over the following weeks, word spread through the military community. The old man in the red jacket wasn't just a spectator. He was a legend who had been standing quietly at the fence, watching, waiting, unrecognized. Mechanics from other bases started requesting transfers to the depot just for the chance to learn from him. The first Tuesday of each month became known as Reeves Day, when the master sergeant would arrive in his red jacket and spend hours working with the young soldiers, teaching them not just the technical skills, but the wisdom that only decades of experience could provide. The 3 mechanics who had dismissed him became his most dedicated students, determined to honour the lesson they had learned the hard way. The stuck Mowag incident became part of depot lore, told and retold to every new arrival. The story of how 3 trained mechanics declared a job impossible, how they dismissed an old man's offer of help, and how that old man freed a 30-ton vehicle in under 3 minutes, using nothing but knowledge, experience, and an understanding of physics that no amount of modern equipment could replace. It became a teaching story about respect, about assumptions, about the difference between credentials and true expertise. And every time the story was told, it ended the same way. Never judge someone by their appearance. Never dismiss someone because they don't fit your image of an expert. And always, always show respect, because you never know who might be standing quietly in a red jacket, watching, waiting, capable of solving in minutes what you've declared impossible.